Okay, let's talk about something really complex today. A relationship dynamic that can be incredibly intense and honestly quite difficult to navigate.
hmm It's a specific kind of entanglement, isn't it?
Sure.
Often involving someone who's, let's say, highly sensitive or very empathetic.
Exactly. And they connect with someone who, well, exhibits traits often described as narcissistic.
Right. And these connections, they can feel incredibly powerful, almost overwhelming at times.
Yeah. And what's interesting is how they're sometimes framed not just as hard, but as potential learning experiences, really profound ones, even if they're painful.
That's a key idea, that there might be something significant to understand or learn from going through it.
So let's try and get a clearer picture of these patterns today. Understand what's typically happening in these situations.
Okay, where should we start? Maybe the beginning, because that initial phase is often quite dramatic.
Yeah, let's do that. Because the way it often starts is described as almost intoxicating, really
Mhm.
captivating.
Absolutely. There's this word sometimes used, almost addictive feeling to it, an intensity that can feel almost overwhelming.
Overwhelming, yeah, like a really strong pull.
And the person with those narcissistic traits can initially seem like, well, like a savior figure,
Mm.
almost larger than life.
Like someone riding in on a white horse
Right.
to rescue you or free you from something.
Exactly, that image. They might arrive and just sweep you off your feet, making you feel incredibly special.
Saying all the right things like, you're amazing, you're a miracle.
Yes. Things that really tap into a deep desire to be seen, to be understood, especially if you've been longing for that kind of connection.
And the timing often feels, well, almost fated, doesn't it? Like they appear at just the right moment.
Right. There might be this sense that, oh, they reached out just when they could, maybe when other commitments weren't in the way. It feels very personal.
Which makes it even more potent for someone who's really yearning for that deep bond.
Definitely. It hits that core need for acceptance.
Now, on the other side, who tends to get drawn into this? Is there a particular type of person?
Well, often it's someone described as, hypersensitive
Yeah.
or just a deeply romantic soul.
A romantic soul, like someone who maybe sees the best in people, perhaps a bit easily swayed by grand gestures.
Yeah, maybe someone whose worldview is shaped by that yearning for love. And crucially, these are often people who naturally prioritize others,
Putting others' needs first.
way first. Sometimes to the point where their own needs, their own identity kind of fades into the background. They might naturally fall into a serving role.
And this readiness to serve, is that what the other person is looking for?
That seems to be the core of it. They aren't necessarily seeking an equal partner for mutual growth. It's more about finding that service.
Service. That sounds quite stark.
It is. The idea is that their own main relationships, maybe a marriage or partnership, might be more about appearances or just practicalities like paper connections.
Lacking real emotional depth.
Exactly. So they seek someone else to fill this other need, someone they can mold, control, someone who will essentially cater to them, like a combination of a mother, caregiver, everything rolled into one.
Wow. So, needing someone to manage their life and give constant emotional support without asking for much back.
Pretty much unconditional emotional labor without true reciprocity. That's the dynamic that gets set up.
Okay, so that's the setup. But we know it doesn't stay in that idealized phase. It shifts,
It
right?
shifts dramatically.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets really unpleasant. There's this really graphic metaphor sometimes used to describe it.
I think I know the one you mean. It's quite shocking.
It is. It involves being sort of metaphorically smeared with something foul, but it's disguised as love or care.
Right. It's meant to show how something presented as nurturing is actually deeply manipulative and, well, horrible underneath.
Exactly. It captures that feeling of deep unease, of something being fundamentally wrong, even if it's presented nicely.
And what happens when the sensitive person reacts? When they finally say, hang on, this doesn't feel right, or this hurts?
Ah, that's the crucial moment. When they react instinctively, like saying, this stinks, essentially pointing out the manipulation, they get attacked.
Attacked how?
They're told they're the problem. It's gaslighting. You need therapy, or that's just your ego, or it's because of your difficult childhood.
Even if maybe their childhood looked okay on the surface.
Right. It doesn't matter. The point is to make them doubt their own reaction, their own reality, to blame their feelings on some internal flaw or past trauma.
That's incredibly effective at maintaining control, isn't it?
Highly effective, because it chips away at your self-trust. Bit by bit, your sense of what's real gets distorted. Your emotional state starts depending entirely on them.
If they're happy, you feel okay. If they're not, you feel awful.
Exactly. And this works because that romantic soul, the sensitive person, often wants to believe the best, They trusted the initial wise words, the idealization. They cling to that hope.
So they accept the twisted explanations because they so badly want the good part to be real again.
Precisely. They're caught in that hope, even while experiencing something deeply disturbing.
And that initial showering of attention, the idealization, it wasn't free then.
Not at all. Think of it like an investment they made, expecting a return. And the sensitive person pays it back
Pays it back how?
with their energy,
Yeah.
their emotional resources, their mental peace, their time, their sense of self. You end up paying for that temporary high with ongoing manipulation and suffering.
Feeling completely drained and depleted.
Yeah, having given so much and getting basically toxicity in return.
Okay, this sounds incredibly painful, but you mentioned earlier this idea of it being a lesson, a karmic lesson.
Yes, that's a central theme that often comes up. That this isn't just random suffering, but a major learning opportunity.
A learning opportunity. What's the core lesson supposed to be then?
Fundamentally, it seems to boil down to learning how to protect yourself.
Protect yourself seems basic, but in this context.
It's incredibly difficult. And maybe it's so difficult because it's a lesson the person hasn't fully grasped before. Perhaps on a deep soul level.
Like learning boundaries, realizing your worth isn't tied to their approval.
Exactly. And learning to see manipulation for what it is, no matter how it's dressed up. For someone maybe wired for people-pleasing, this requires dismantling core patterns. Huge work.
And it must be so confusing when you're in the middle of it.
Terribly confusing, which is why sometimes outside help is crucial.
Like therapy.
Yes, a psychologist, a therapist, someone neutral who can help you see clearly again, especially when the other person is actively hiding things, twisting reality, telling you it's all in your head.
You need that external validation, that reality check.
To rebuild trust in your own perceptions.
And this type of relationship, it's seen as a particularly hard lesson.
It's often positioned that way. Life involves choices, different paths. Some lessons are tougher than others. And relationships with individuals causing this kind of disturbance are sometimes described as, well, the most difficult lessons of all.
Wow. The most difficult? That says a lot about the intensity and the level of manipulation involved.
It does. It suggests the sheer psychological effort and personal growth needed to navigate it.
And meanwhile, the person with narcissistic traits is trying to keep the connection going.
Desperately. Because being alone, losing that control and supply, can feel like a kind of death to them. So they'll fight to keep you entangled.
But the focus ultimately is on the lesson for the person experiencing this.
Right. And the lesson isn't about staying stuck. It's explicitly not about remaining a victim.
So being a victim is a state you find yourself in, but not who you have to be.
Exactly. It's a condition, perhaps, but one you can choose to move beyond. It reframes the whole thing.
It's not just something awful that happened to you, but a challenge that offers a chance to reclaim your power.
Precisely. Reclaiming agency, learning self-protection, learning to recognize and leave situations that are harmful. That's presented as a critical form of liberation.
So looking back at our conversation, we've traced this really intense path, starting with that almost magical idealization,
Which targets those deep needs and vulnerabilities.
followed by that insidious shift into control, manipulation, that feeling of something being deeply wrong, even when disguised as care.
Leading to a lot of pain and confusion.
But ultimately framed as this potentially powerful, if incredibly hard, lesson.
A lesson in self-protection, setting boundaries, and making choices for your own well-being.
It really underscores the kind of inner strength and clarity it takes to face that reality and learn from it.
Absolutely. Learning to value and protect yourself above all else in such a situation is monumental.
So a final thought then. If the hardest lessons often hold the most value, what does confronting and moving through a challenge like this really show about a person's own resilience, their capacity for growth?
That's a powerful question to reflect on, isn't it? It suggests incredible strength lies in that journey.